Hello? All right, there we go. Hey everybody, how's it going? Thank you all for staying. I feel like it's been a pretty long day here, and it's always kind of hard to stay till the last session, but I also feel like we've had some really fantastic speakers and maybe, some tough speakers to follow as well. So thanks for all these fantastic talks today. Like we talked about, I'll talk a little bit about what I do at Swiss Water, though Connie, thank you. You already gave me a great introduction. So kind of what I do, again, is I run our cupping lab at Swiss Water. So I work very closely with our traders and our importers, and I do all of the quality control, like I said. So I cup and I score all of the coffees that we buy, but also kind of what's really important are all of those physical attributes of coffee. We want to make sure that the coffee can stand up to the decaffeination process. So not only are we looking for flavors, but we're looking for water activity. We're needing the coffees to meet our water activity standards, moisture standards, also density standards, and screen size standards, because if it doesn't meet those standards, it's not going to be decaffeinated to its fullest potential. And that's obviously what we want, is we want decaf to be tasting great. And then on the other side of it, I also do all of me and my team, I should say, because I have a fantastic team, and we do all of the quality control for all of our productions. So what that means is I'm always keeping a little bit of that coffee that we just bought, and we're cupping those side by side, which is actually kind of cool, and we're not using your typical cupping sheet as well. So what we're looking for is we're looking for flavor, we're looking for sourness, we're looking for texture, and we're also looking for thickness, and we're scoring those. Then we're looking for overall likeness of the two, and we're also looking for overall flavor. So that's kind of what I do on a day-to-day basis. And then this is going to be a Swiss Water heavy presentation, but I do think that everything that we're going to talk through today is really going to help you all roast decaf better, and maybe just, be more confident in your roasting in general, right? And have fun. Key there is to have fun. So, and it's been a while since there we go. All right, so we're gonna look at approaches to roasting decaf coffee. And what we're gonna go over today is what is Swiss Water decaf? How do we decaffeinate coffee? What are some guidelines for roasting decaf? And why does decaf roast differently? Maybe some thoughts, theories, and ideas there. And then I'm also going to leave quite a bit of time for questions at the end, because I'm sure I'm not going to cover some stuff, and maybe you have some fun things that happen during roasting or some weird stuff that happened that you have a question about. And I'm totally here to answer all of those questions for you today. So I really want to be able to cover any questions that you all have. So first off, Swiss Water is a decaffeination process that uses only water to decaffeinate coffee. And it's also chemical free. So what this does is it keeps a lot of the organic compounds in the coffee. So you're going to be able to keep the aroma of your coffee from the origin, as well as you're going to be able to taste those origin flavors as well, which is something that I really love. Next off, that's great, but what does that all mean, and how does it happen? So here you can see the cycle of how we decaffeinate coffee. So first off, we're gonna clean the green coffee. And what does that mean? So we're gonna take off like the mucilage actually before, or that silver skin before we decaffeinate coffee, because we wanna kind of get rid of that little barrier there. We wanna just really be able to contact the coffee. Then we're gonna soak the coffee in just regular water at first, because we want it to swell and we want to bring up the moisture level in the coffee. So we're going to bring it up to like 100% moisture level. It's going to double in size. We really want it to swell, and we want it to become more porous. Then what's going to happen afterwards is we're going to soak the coffee in what's called GCE for short, or green coffee extract. And what green coffee extract is all of the soluble compounds found in green coffee without the caffeine. So the next process is to take those super swollen beans and soak them in this green coffee extract. And what's going to happen there is there's going to be this reaction, and the caffeine from the green coffee is going to move over into the green coffee extract. There's going to be this little imbalance going on. And so the GCE is going to take away all of that caffeine. And this takes about 40 hours in our big tanks in our facility. Once all of that happens, what's going to happen is we're going to take it over to our dryers, where all the coffee is laid out on these big giant conveyor belts, and it's sent through this kind of, to be honest, pretty scary looking dryer. I'm not going to lie, it kind of looks like something out of a horror movie. But it does the trick, and we lay it out all like really fine on the conveyor belt, and it goes through. And this again, we want to dry everything out really evenly, and we're going to bring that moisture level in the coffee back down to 10% moisture. And once we get there, which again is about 3 to 4 hours, given what the variety is, the density of the bean, all that stuff that we looked at in the cupping lab before it was decaffeinated, that all comes into play here, and how long it's going to take for the decaffeination process. Once that's all ready to go, our team bags it up and it's ready for shipping. But now we have all this GCE that's full of caffeine. And no, we're not getting rid of that. We want to be as sustainable as possible, and we actually continue to use that GCE for all of our decaffeination. So it just gets reused and reused and reused. So how does that work? Well, the GCE actually goes through a carbon filtration system, and the carbon filtration pulls all the caffeine out of the GCE. And so that we take up to a furnace, and it's all burnt off in the furnace. The GCE is ready to be used again and reintroduced to new coffee, and the carbon is ready to be used to filter out more caffeine from the GCE. So it's just this kind of continuous cycle that continues to go on and on. And some of you may know we're in the process of moving, and we are actually going to be just always using this same GCE. So even as we're moving, we're going to be moving that GCE from one facility to the other to maintain that same flavor profile all the time. So here are some some important things that I think are some important visual cues for roasting decaf, and just some cues in general. So I think it's really important to pay attention to the texture of the bean, the roast aroma, and the color shift. And this is kind of all similar to roasting coffee. Similarly to roasting coffee, regular coffee, decaf is going to expand. It's going to show its veins. As it continues to develop, it's going to puff up. It's going to even out. This is all pretty similar to roasting regular coffee, right? But as there's going to be a few little visual cues there that are different. So throughout the roast progression, which again I've said is pretty similar, there's one small difference, and that is, and I'm sure you've all seen when you've opened up a bag of green decaf coffee, is it's like 1 shade, maybe 2 shades darker. So this is actually going to continue throughout your entire roast process, which means it's a little hard to tell on those visual cues how I guess let's say dark your coffee actually is. So that is why it's super important to pay attention to your probes, use your roasting data, roasting data, your probes, your temperature readings, your time after first crack, just being super aware of all of those things that are happening in your roast all of the time. Just again, it's that same thing. Pay attention, watch your roast, but also pay attention to whatever software you're using. Also, make sure that you can trust that a lot, especially when you're roasting decaf, because it's always going to be a little bit darker on the outside. So here you can see I've got a few slides here with the roasting progression. So this is just a roast. And we're going in 30-second progressions from the very beginning to the very end. So as you can see, it's always a little bit darker on the other side. But the really cool thing is, if you look down at the bottom, at the final side on the bottom corner over there, is that the ground coffee is actually the same color, even though you can see that it's quite a bit darker on the outside. So what I find and what we use in the lab whenever we're cupping is we use this kind of sheet over here, and we actually, for every sample that we roast or that we cup in the lab, is we'll grind about, I don't know, like a little line, I don't know, 5 to 10 grams of coffee, and we line it all up side by side by side by side. And that way it's a visual cue as to like how dark our coffee is, and that all of the coffee that we're cupping is kind of at that same level. So it's kind of a cool thing for you to do too, as like an experiment or something. So, just kind of try it, just grind it up side by side by side and see if you are reaching that same roast level every time that you're roasting. And as you can see also on the side, the little bean is obviously quite a bit darker than the ground coffee over there. So roasting decaf, where do we start? Well, even before what we have over there on the side, something that I like to do when I'm starting to dial in a new decaf is, a lot of the time, if I already have a coffee from that particular origin, I'll kind of use that roast curve that I already have as my guide, but I'm gonna make a few slight changes. And one of the first changes I tend to make, and I like to use as like a rule of thumb, if you will, is to start with a slightly lower charge temperature. So here, like, I'm usually doing about 10 to 15 degrees lower charge temperature. So if I had, let's say I like to charge my washed Columbia at 425 degrees Fahrenheit, I'm going to drop that probably to 410 or 415 degrees Fahrenheit. And then, maybe follow that same roast curve that I have and cup it, and then go from there and adjust my roast as I go. So some recommendations for roasting decaf, or just how I like to roast decaf. I can't stress this enough, and even while I was having lunch with Andy over there, we talked about being gentle with your roast. And I think this is I feel like a broken record, and whenever anybody asks me, like, what should I do when I'm roasting decaf? I'm like, just be gentle with your roast. Take your time, be patient, slow it down a little bit. So that is kind of my one thing I will repeat and repeat and repeat through our time today. What I like to do is I like to gradually bring my temperature up. I'm going to gradually bring my airflow up. I love playing with convection and conduction. It's just a fun thing to do. And then also, as a general rule, decaf is also a lot of the time going to readily give up moisture early in your roast. So again, remember, we took that, we're gonna lose this. We took that silver skin off of the bean. So we took a little bit of extra protection already off the bean before we started processing the coffee. And that is going to make the bean more porous, and also kind of make it easier for it to lose moisture. Next off, it's super important to pay attention to first crack. It's gonna be a little bit softer, but it can also really take off on you. So again, being gentle, I told you I was gonna repeat myself a lot. Being gentle with your roast is going to help you with that. So maybe as you're noticing that your coffee is starting to brown, and again, it's gonna start to brown a little bit earlier than you're used to in your normal roast, start to bring that temperature down a little bit, slowly, bit by bit, either by using, depending on what roaster you're using, either by using your heat or your fan settings, pull back on that energy input before you're hitting first crack, and that should help you out there just a little bit. But again, be careful, because if you pull back on that energy too soon, what you're gonna notice is your roast could very easily crash, and we definitely don't want that. Next off, remember, your coffee has gone through a lot of changes. The water activity in the bean has changed. It has gone out, it has gone in, it has gone from 100% to 10%. You know, this little bean, he's gone through a lot and he needs to be treated with care, or she, or they. They need to be treated with care. Oil on your coffee, it's okay. And I know this is a very scary thing when we first start to roast decaf, is you're gonna notice that either within your roast or maybe a few days off roast, that there are gonna be oils on your coffee. And anybody who roasts light, this is all a scary thing for us, I know. So as you're roasting, you're gonna notice that oils may be appearing on the surface. Decaffeination, like we said before, breaks down the organic materials in the coffee, which is going to create for a more porous cell wall. And this is going to allow for the moisture to escape more easily during roasting, so you're going to notice those oils. Totally okay, totally normal. Do not panic. It's going to be fine, and it's going to taste great. I have total faith in all of you. So, like I said before, have fun. It's, I think, the most important part of your job is to have fun and love what you're doing. So roast, cup, adjust, repeat. These are kind of just I'm just trying to give you all ideas to just help you out a little bit. These are, you know, just things that I found in my, like, I guess it's been like almost 10 years of roasting now. These are just kind of things that I've learned over time and working at Swiss Water a little bit as well. The best way to improve is through trial and error and repetition. So when you're roasting, take notes, time your roasts, pay attention to your aroma, pay attention to color change, pay attention to temperature, cup with your team, talk about it, like have discussions. I know a lot of us, especially in production roasting, we're in a rush. You know, we don't have time. It's like it's all gonna get done. Oh my God, I've got however many roasts in a day. But the only way you're gonna get better is if you talk about it and if you cup together and if you calibrate together. These are all super important things. So again, you know, in your team, or if you have to cup by yourself, ask yourself, do these changes that you make in your heat or in your airflow affect the result in the cup, and why? And then maybe just make little changes. Again, just make one change at a time, because obviously if you make 3 changes, you're not gonna know which change was the change that made the difference. So make one change at a time and go from there. The more data you have, the easier it's gonna be to improve your roasts. Over here on the side, this is kind of just, well, it is, I shouldn't say it's kind of, it is a picture of one of our production cuppings. So on the, I guess for you guys, the left side is the regular coffee, and then on the right side is the decaf coffee, right? Yeah. And then usually what we're gonna do, or what I do and my team, is we cup the 2 cups of regular next to the 2 cups of decaf. And I know that you probably don't have, you know, a regular and a decaf version of whatever your decaf is, but there's a very good chance that you have the same origin. So kind of a fun project that you could do is cup those 2, you know, roast them to a similar end temperature, similar development time, and cup them side by side. See how that goes. And another thing that we can do here, also that I like to do with my team, is roast the 2 the way I would roast a decaf, and then roast the 2 the way I would a regular coffee. And then talk about whether or not the regular coffee tastes okay roasted the decaf way, and whether the decaf tastes okay roasted the regular way. So it's kind of what we did here. So I decided to explore a little bit myself. So I did 2 roast profiles here. I did what I call my aggressive roast and my gentle roast. For the aggressive roast, I chose a higher charge temperature of 425 degrees Fahrenheit. I put on full gas and full air at turnaround, or like around 1.5 minutes. I went full power, full air all the way to first cracks. I'm definitely being, a little dramatic with this roast. I'm not gonna lie there. Then I brought my temperature down again quite quickly. I said this is an aggressive roast. As I hit first crack, I was shooting for 1.5 minutes development time. I ended up with an end temperature of 10 minutes and 5 seconds, or an end time of 10 minutes and 5 seconds, and an end temperature of 403 Fahrenheit. And then what I wanted to do with roast 2, the gentle roast, was at the very least get that same development time, try and keep it to as close as that end time as possible, and get the same end temperature. But again, using something that was more gentle with my roast. So what I did there was, again, I did that, like I said, I did my rule of thumb and I brought my charge temperature down about 15%. I, again, did that gradual buildup. Basically, probably starting at about 30 seconds into my roast, I started to bring up my heat and open my airflow. And then I had it on pretty close to full by about 3 minutes. So being a little bit more gradual with the opening of the air and the bringing up of the temperature. And then again, kind of as I started to see that browning, I started to very slowly bring the temperature back down. Ended up with the same development time. Again, because I'm being a little bit slower with all that stuff, my roast was a little bit slower. I ended up with an end time of 10:30 at an end temperature of about 403 as well. So I ended up with some pretty close stuff there in my roasts. What I chose to roast was just one of our regular washed Columbia Excelso EP. This is probably one of the coffees that we sell the most of at Swiss Water. And then I also chose this was probably it was a grade 1 natural Ethiopia local landrace variety for my other coffee. So I wanted 2 coffees that were pretty different, different origins, different processing methods, pretty different coffees altogether. And what we noticed was that in roast 1, we did get positive flavors. So we've got cacao nibs, red apple, red grape, yellow plum. That all tastes and sounds pretty good, right? But unfortunately, we also got some green pepper, some hay-like flavors, some papery and bitter and wood smoke. And then for the Ethiopia, again, we did get some nice flavors on that as well. So florals, black tea, blackberry, those really nice, stone fruits that you get a lot of the time in Ethiopian coffees as well. But then we ended up with almond skin, dry finish. And this was a really interesting thing that my team noticed when they were cupping. So I actually did bring in my team. I brought in a whole bunch of people at work and I'm like, we're gonna do this cupping and I'm not gonna tell you why. But one of the interesting things is that we found that we could really taste the decaf in this roast. And again, the decaf is always going to be there. It's never going to go away. I would be lying to tell you all that you can't taste the decaf. But it was definitely much more apparent in this roast, in both the taste of the coffee, but in the aroma when we were smelling the grounds as well. And then what we noticed was for roast 2, again, there's no red on the bottom there, so we've got much more positive flavor notes. So for the Columbia Excelso, it again became much more complex. We had black tea, brown sugar, dark chocolate, grape, raspberry, red apple, red currant. It had a really creamy, syrupy body. So it's a pretty big improvement on 30 seconds, and just being gentle and taking your time with the coffee. And then again, With the Ethiopian coffee, what we found was we had more bergamot. So our black tea and our florals became more complex. We had this specific flavor coming out. Still had the nectarine, blackberry, but we also had this really great sugary sweetness that evolved from this roast as well. And then a really syrupy body. And then again, that process of the decaf process was a little less apparent in this roast. So as you can see, and again, this is something that you can try. Maybe keep a little notebook, and every time you dial in a new coffee or a new decaf, this is what you do. I'm hoping to kind of continue this on as some stuff that we just do in the cupping lab for fun. But as you can see, the more gentle process seemed to, well, it did work for both a pretty hard washed coffee and a natural coffee as well. So this is a little short, but like I said, I wanted to give you all a lot of time for questions. But yeah, more than anything, I want you all to have fun, explore, taste your roasts, and roast what makes you happy, guys.